The Tuskegee Airmen, Inc. National Heritage Committee is honored to bring you the voice and person of documented original Tuskegee Airmen who were members of the 477th Bombardment Group during World War II.
Good afternoon, Heritage Committee and all of the friends attending. I'm Jerry T Hodges, Tuskegee Airman, Class 45F, and also a member of the 477th Composite Group, 617th Bomber Squadron. My life began as a child. I was born in Memphis, Tennessee, which was strictly there because of the hospital, but my home was in Arkansas. I grew up on the farm, one of the very few farm boys that ended up at Tuskegee. My very first contact with any flying of any kind was with my father had an alfalfa patch, and one day a green biplane pusher type landed in the alfalfa field, and we were, all of the kids and all of the people on the farm gathered around to see this airplane. They had landed because they were almost out of gas. Subsequent to that, as I was growing up, I started building model airplanes from, I guess it's plywood of some kind during that period, never anticipating that I would become a flyer myself. During later growing up, when the war started, the Second World War, in 1941, when we were bombed by Pearl Harbor, I was in high school, and the campaign was started by what was called the Roosevelt Kitchen Cabinet. In that cabinet, primarily was Judge William Hasty. He was governor of the Virgin Islands at the time, and Mary McLeod Bethune, who established a college down in Florida. Miss Bethune was a very close friend of Mr. Roosevelt's wife, and had very close contact with the White House. But the group and the newspapers, the Pittsburgh Courier, the Chicago Defender, and the Newport News, I've forgotten the last name, Newport News, they started a campaign to get black people able to fly, because at that time, when the war really started, the Air Corps, which was a part of the Signal Corps, only had about 2,500 planes, and half of them or more were trainers. We had a very small Air Force at the time, and they had to really get to busy building the Air Force, but they still didn't want black people flying because they had they thought they were not able to handle that complicated machinery. But through the help of Mr. Hasty, Mary McLeod Bethune, President Roosevelt's wife, they started a flying program at Tuskegee for the Air Corps. Prior to that, in 1939, they had started a civilian pilot training program just to get people trained for flying. And that program was also started at 8 of the Negro colleges. That's what we were known as in those days, Negro. Tuskegee was one, and it happened to be the one where they started the program. Actually, I never would have been in the Air Corps or even in college, because my ambition when I graduated from high school was to go to training, learn how to be an electrician, a welder, or some other program, and then come to California and work and earn the fantastic salary of $120 a week. I was destined, I was determined to do that. However, my principal, Anna M.P. Strong in Arkansas, had a long talk with me, and we ended up with doing a bargain. We made a bargain. She said, you go to college 1 year. You go in there 1 year, complete that 1 year, and if you want to stop at that time, okay. If not, you'll continue. That did it. She arranged for me to enter Hampton, what was Institute in Hampton, Virginia at the time. And this was in August of 1943. I entered the Hampton, carried a full program, and worked 25 hours a week in the college, what do they call that, in the college store. I completed 1 year, and just before completing the 1 year, I received a 1A classification from the draft board in Hampton. I told my mother about it, and my mother suggested, she said, hey, look, they've got a program down at Tuskegee for flying, and you used to build these little model aircraft and stuff. Why don't you investigate that, see if you can get into that program? I did. I had to take 3 examinations, one at Langley Field, one at, I think it was a fort that was down there, and another examination. I was fortunate enough to pass all 3 of them. And they gave me a letter stating that I had been enlisted and I could not be drafted into the Army. The draft board says, well, we will wait until the end of the semester and see what happens. End of the semester came up. I had not heard from the Air Corps. So they sent me on June 6, 1944. Remember that date? June 6, 1944. That was the day that Europe was invaded by the United Nations. That was the beginning where we really went into Europe to try to win it back. I went to pre-examination. I took my letter with me. They read the letter and sent me back. Said, we can't do anything with this man. He's enlisted. They sent me back to Hampton. The draft board says, well, we're going to send you to Camp Lee and tell them to keep you until they decide what to do. Isn't this something? Isn't that something? But they also highlighted another thing for people volunteering for aviation training, black people volunteering for aviation training, and they had to wait months and months and months to finally get into the program. It was like it was an intentional delay. However, I went to Camp Lee, and I was in Camp Lee so long, for over a month, which was the reception center. I was there so long until new recruits that were coming in every day, they thought I was a permanent cadre there. And I let them think that I got a little job for myself, taking care of the library, because I like to read, and I could spend the whole day in the library doing all the reading I wanted. Finally, to Mississippi. The air base in Mississippi for basic training. There was one other cadet, pre-aviation cadet there, that's what they were called, who had been overlooked in the prior shipment to Tuskegee. What would happen is they would give basic training to these groups, and when they get about 70 or so of them, they group them up, ship them to Tuskegee. His name had been overlooked. Just a minute for him. He had completed CPT training prior to entering, and from West Virginia. He was already a pilot. And he loved flying. But every time something would supposedly open up, it would seem he would have the bad luck of being on the end of it and bad things. I'll tell you now, eventually he became a pilot, and he made a career of it because he loved flying, and Air Corps what he's doing. So he ended up, after the war, still in the service, flying a jet fighter, took off, had a flame out, and we lost him. Mm. I didn't know about it right at the time. I discovered later. But anyway, down in Mississippi, at this air base, we were in a group all by ourselves. And every day while we were there, they would come and get a group, take us to another group, and we'd supposed to do KP, kitchen police, or clean up an area or something. I remember the first time I experienced that. They took us to clean up a place where the night before they had had a USA program for the servicemen. We knew nothing about it in our black group, but here we are cleaning up after them the next day. One man that was with our group, he protested it, and he brought to their attention that President Roosevelt had signed a non-discrimination memo or something. Boy, they got him out of there that same day, all by himself, shipped him to Tuskegee because they didn't want no kind of trouble like that. Eventually, I got to Tuskegee in September, I think it was late August. And in September, we started training in my class. 45F was the program, was the class I was being taught with. We started off with a 70 students entering the training. Eventually, we graduated with 39, which was the highest number of students to graduate in a single class during the entire programs at Tuskegee Airfield. Now, some said there was what is it? What do you call it? Anyway, there was a suspicion that there was a quota system, that only a certain percentage could graduate each period from Tuskegee in accordance with what that percentage was of the graduating class from Maxwell Field, which was about 50 miles up the road. An example, the class that followed me immediately, with the 70 that they started out with, they graduated 12. Jimmy Dillard, that I spoke to you about, was a member of that class, and he was the only commissioned second lieutenant in that class of 12. In my class, we had 16 twin-engine pilots to graduate, and I think 12 of them were commissioned second lieutenants. The others were flight officers. What's a flight officer? That was a rank that they created for pilots that graduated, and they considered as not being quite as efficient as the ones who got second lieutenants. Okay, I'm graduated, second lieutenant. I'm flying, but I didn't tell you about my flying in primary. The first time I went up, I had heard of an instructor in primary from Hampton, who was supposedly a good instructor, and I put a note in, requested him as an instructor, and I got it. He was the one that took me on, along with his other students in my class. And the very first flight, he took me up in the air, and I'm looking out in this open cockpit plane at the railroads and highways and rivers and lakes. I said, I will never be able to fly this airplane. I will never be able to do this. Mm-hmm. But this instructor was good, smooth, and he explained everything, and I followed him, and I was among the first to fly solo in primary. Incidentally, in primary, in my class, we had one man who was a commercial pilot. He had a commercial license, an instructor's license, and some other radio license and something else. He was another man in my class. Really dedicated flyer. There was another one who had been an instructor in primary, and he wanted to fly with the Air Corps, so he volunteered to take our training to become a pilot. Then we had another one who was a graduate engineer who had been taught CPT prior to coming in. He was also a good pilot. I sometimes wonder how he made it, because he was overweight the whole time, but he was an excellent pilot. Okay, now, after I soloed, what I had been really waiting for, because I had the attitude that went with being a fighter pilot. My attitude and disposition pointed toward that. I was waiting, after I learned to fly, to get up there by myself, and I'm gonna do some aerobatics. Aerobatics. Oh, I could see myself. So on my first flight up, they gave me, instead of a PT-17, they gave me a PT-13, which was the same airplane but a different kind of propeller. I went up and did a half an hour's flying in it, because each plane has its own characteristics. And I wasn't used to it, so I was careful that day. But the next day, they gave me a PT-17. I got up in my area, there's nobody else up there but me. I'm up there all by myself. Boy, I can do some aerobatics now. Well, first, I'll try a loop. Got altitude, dived, got airspeed, pulled up, went on over in the loop. It worked out good. Did it another time, good. Then I decided I was going to try, I've forgotten the name of it, where you go up and then level off in the other direction. Then I looked over in the other area next to where I was flying. You see, our area was a quadrangle, and each group that was flying would stay in one area. Looked over into the other area, and there was an PT-17 diving, going up and turning around, level off. I looked at that. I hadn't seen anything like that before. And it looked so easy, I decided I could do that too. Altitude, airspeed, going up in the air, and I'm getting ready to turn around. And I'm sitting there looking at the sky, and the airplane stopped flying.
Oh, no.
It's just sitting there, motors running and everything. My flaps, rudders, I could move them all, no compression, anything. And then the plane started sliding down on its tail, and my nose up in the air. I said, what do I do now? I remembered my instructor had told me, my first instructor, that if anything starts going wrong in this airplane, turn it loose, it will straighten itself out. I did and prayed. it slid, and then the nose flipped over in a stall. I gained airspeed and started flying again. I was through with aerobatics that day. I didn't do any more, except in the training in upper primary, where they changed my instructor on me. After I completed lower basic, I go out to fly, and I get another instructor, completely different from what I'd had, completely different. But he was an instructor, so I went with it. And that's where I really got the training for aerobatics. He gave me the training. He wasn't as smooth on the controls as my first instructor. But anyway, we worked and got through. One day I came down from flying, and my old instructor was landing and parking right next to me. I greeted him, and I said, "Hey, want to take a flight with me?" And he said, "Yeah." So he came over, got in the cockpit. I got in the cockpit. I took off. I'm going to show him something. He gave me up for somebody else to teach me, but I learned anyway. We take off, I go up in the air, and I'm flying around. Then I did a slow roll. Then I did a snap roll. And he said, "Give it to me." He did the same thing. And it was so smooth, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it, how smooth he was on the controls. And I wondered why he hadn't been there to teach me that. But anyway, when we landed, he got out and went over the side of the airplane, held his head down. And I discovered then the reason was he would get airsick when they started doing aerobatics. He could do everything else, but when he started doing that, he'd get airsick. Okay, I survived that. Basic training, we were flying the AT-10, called the Trainer 10. Retractable landing gear, flaps and everything. And it really was a plane that was used by some South American countries as a fighter plane. When we went there into basic training to fly that, we were the second class to fly the AT-10 in basic. Prior to that, they flew a BT-10, which was completely different, and not nearly comparable. But they had moved it down to basic training. At the same time, in twin engine, they moved the AT-10 for the twin engine trainees out to change to the B-25 bomber. Stripped down. Stripped down means they'd taken all the guns out and stuff like that. But anyway, I managed to get through basic, went into advanced, and this was the first time I'd had a white instructor. In lower advanced, my roommate and I happened to get the same instructor. And the first day we flew with him, he said, listen, cadets, you are my students, and my students always solo first. If you don't solo first, I'm going to wash you out. Now remember that. I did. And my flight buddy did also. So we went through that. I had no problem in advance. This guy was good. He was prejudiced. He refused to call us Mr. Hodges or Mr. Mose. He called us cadet. And when we would walk, we'd have to walk 2 steps behind him and to the left, not side by side. But he was a damn good instructor. He was really good. And we were the first to solo the bomber, the B-25. Now, what is the B-25? That's the bomber that they used to bomb Tokyo from ships out in the Pacific Ocean. B-25. And it wasn't a fast plane, but it was a hardy plane. It was really rugged and good. Now, a little change. My roommate and I were the first ones to solo, so the next day, when these other cadets started soloing, they flew us down to, sent us down to the auxiliary field, my buddy and I. We're going to take an airplane down and wait for the rest of them. And then we get out. We will let the new cadets solo with us. I'm the first one to solo in the class. Big head already. I go down, first one at the auxiliary field. I land, and I'm gonna do something fancy. I'm gonna park over on the side, and when I turn around, my tail's gonna stick out over the ground there. I roll out there, and I start turning around, and bloom, a wheel hits the ground. Oh my goodness. Here I am, the first one to fly solo in the class. And I thought I'd wrecked the plane. And we got out. Then the other class, others started coming in. And they got all these enough cadets that to lift that plane up and put that wheel back on the left. Now, I had expected that they were going to give me a lot of trouble, bracing and treatment for what I had done. They jumped on my partner, my classmate, the guy who was solo with me. They jumped on him. They said, "Why did you let him do that? You're sitting right there. Why did you let him do that?" He took punishment.
Oh, no.
That's the way things go. That's the way things go. Anyway, graduation, wings, gold plate, and all this stuff. And we have, on the base, they had started accumulating pilots. They had started bringing back navigators and bombardiers that had been trained for that and training them to be pilots. They were going to become double and triple rated airmen. And this is because the base up at Freeman Field, where the 477th was, they were having a little problem with their training program, and the commander of the base. The war is about over, so they're not shipping these younger guys over to fly in Italy anymore. Air Force, Air Corps seems like a pretty good career. I was thinking at the time, well, if you want to become a career man, you got to get a job. And I looked around, I couldn't find one, so I went back to my my upper advanced instructor, Captain Howard Ball, who was a 99th pilot that had been returned and then ended up being head of the twin-engine training department. And I had flown with him. And I went back to him and I asked him, I said, hey, look, said you down here and you running all of this, you got to do all this paperwork. Why don't you have me assigned as your administrative officer? I'll take all that work off of you. Great. Now he can spend his time shooting the bull with the fellow guys coming back. I do the work. I'm now career bound. So they gave orders and I became his career instructor. I forgot one thing. What did you like? What did you enjoy most? One of the things. In upper advance, I guess single engine and in twin engine, you get to fly one legal low-level flight round robin. You leave the base, you fly to a city, you leave that, you go to another city, and you come back to the base. Low level. You can't really see where you are, you always see it right around here. Okay, in my low-level flight, there were two other students and myself. Captain Howard Ball, the head of the department, who was my instructor in upper advance, he was a hot rodder. He was a hot rodder pilot. I don't know why he let them put him in the twin engine training, because it really wasn't for him. So we go out on the flight. The first student takes the flight around. He's up about 50 feet in the air. I look at Captain Ball, and he's sitting up there, about to go to sleep, go around and land. The next student comes on. He does the same thing. He's up there, in the air where he's not even close to the ground. My time comes. I put that sucker right on the ground. We were flying so low that my propellers were cutting the tops out of the cornfield. Captain Ball woke up then. He looked up and saw that, he was getting more fun than I was having. We were flying along and we started approaching a house. It's one of these houses they build like in the South, where on one side is the living quarters, and the other side is eating quarters, breakfast, dining room stuff. And he said, go through that one. And I hit it straight forward and pulled up just over it, and he had fun. When we got almost, and this is the thing, we got back, hit it almost back to Tuskegee. He said, let me have it. He took over, and we headed to where he and his family lived. Low level, over the city. Cut the power lines to his home in that area, and then went on to the base. I saw Captain Ball about 20 years later, and I said, Captain Ball, he's a colonel now. Did your wife ever say anything about you cutting the power line over there? And he said, yes, she did. She won't forget it. She reminds me of it all the time. I said, okay. Incidentally, he's deceased now. He drove himself, he had a heart attack, and he drove himself to the hospital. This was in Virginia, and his son, I forgot to tell you, his son was like 4 years old. He brought him out one day. I got with him, I'm supposed to be the co-pilot. He put his son in the co-pilot seat, 4 years old. I was with him when he took his son on his very first flight. The son ended up as a commercial airline pilot, and I think it was United Airlines, commercial airline pilot. And they are built a statue of him in the city where he is. Okay, I'm graduated. I've had all this fun. Time to move, and they picked me and one of my classmates as the first two guys to go to then Lockburn Air Base. Lockburn Air Base, Columbus, Ohio. That's the base where they transferred the 477th Bomber Group from Freeman Field and Godman Field to Lockburn. War's over. They really trying to figure out what to do with all these black guys. Mm-hmm. All right. The 99th gets cut back. So what are they going to do with it? Okay. We got the 477th up in Lockburn. Let's send the 99th up there. They send the 99th up there. And it then changes from the 477th Bomber Group to the 477th Composite Group. Now, the 477th before this had 4 squadrons, 715, 716, 717, 718. They eliminated the first 2, 15 and 16. I was attached to the 717th. Okay, I'm up here. What am I going to do? I'm thinking about the war's over. They're going to do something with some of these guys. Do I become a regular pilot? Well, I can't do that. Why? Because I'm not old enough. I'm not 21 yet. And I can't get a regular commission. I can be a commission in the Army of the United States, but not a regular Army commission. Okay, so how do you manage to stay in at your rank and do job? You find yourself something just like anywhere else. You find something to do where they need you, and you know you can do a good job, and you do it. I still haven't made up my mind. So I'm looking around on the base, and I hear about an opening in the base command at headquarters. So I go up there, and I find out who's getting what it is, what's happening. And it's the statistical control, I couldn't even say the word, statistical control office needed an assistant. That's me. I get the job, I'm working with him as assistant statistical control officer. That puts me on the staff of the whole base. Now, prior to this, when I was just in the 617th, I had to go make formations every Saturday. Our colonel insisted on having those things. I hated them. He made us put on Army uniform, and I got to pull off my pinks and my greens and put on that old Army colored stuff. So now that I'm up here, I don't have to go to that. Why? I tell them I'm busy, I got stuff to do. I don't have time for that. And I can sit in my office and watch them out there marching every Saturday morning. Okay. The statistical control officer said, I want out. He retires, gets out, goes back to civilian life. I'm his assistant. Okay, so they cut orders to send me to Denver, Colorado, whatever that air base is there, to go to statistical control school, and then I'd come back and work there. This is a sure shot to promotions and advance. Do I want this? They got the orders, all I got to do is pick up my travel and go there. But they said one thing, you have to sign up for 2 years if you're going to go to this school. 2 years, I'll be 23 years old. Or do I want to go back to school and do my own? I made the decision. No matter how great the Air Corps was, and it was great, and the pay was good for that time, and I had a good job where I controlled myself. But there's always someone somewhere that can say, hey, you're second lieutenant. We're going to send you to Alaska. We're going to send you to Norway or some other place. I said, no, not for me. I get out. I elected I wouldn't go to Denver. I'm going to get out and go back to school. And applied for school. I went back to Hampton for 1 semester, transferred to University of Southern California the next semester. And would you believe, I knew what I was going to have to take when I got to USC, so I took those courses at Hampton. But I get to USC, I'm an advanced sophomore. I go in and register, and I never saw so many students. But anyway, I finally got registered, and I went in for a review. Get this, with one of the counselors, a young guy, and he looks at my schedule, and he says, well, you know, I see that you registered for the courses for an advanced sophomore. I said, yes, and that is probably good. It's good that you do. But you must remember, this is the University of Southern California, and you're coming from a small school. Do you think you can stay up with our qualifications? He didn't know that that was insulting. And he didn't know that my response was going to be, you can say whatever you like. This is what I'm qualified and this is what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. I told him that. And I went on into class. Got in these classes, and I'm expecting something quite different. These students are just as dumb as the ones I've ever seen anywhere. An example, I took one class, Mathematics of Finance. I'll never forget it. I didn't know what they were talking about, but I took the class, and it was about 60 people in there. When I first went in, I looked it over, and I selected the suit next to what I thought was the oldest man there, and would probably know more about what was going on than anybody else. I said, go sit right next to him. We're going to be friends. And we go to see, that teaching going on. We have our first examination. Oh, Lordy. They grade on a curve in this class. The first test score, 50. The next, 12. And then all the rest of these students, 6, 7, 8, 4, 3. I got to 12. My friend got to 50. I surprised even myself. I still don't know what's going on, but at least I know more about it than anybody else. I eventually learned what they were trying to tell me about 2 years after I got out of school, and it was good. I learned what it was, and it's been very helpful to me over the years. What do you do after you get out of school? Okay. I majored in accounting and finance. I took every course in accounting that they had at the University of Southern California, except the freshman courses. I did not take those, but all the rest of them, every course that they had, I know I'm qualified. So I go for an interview, and the interview, I'm either too young at the time, or I'm too old. But anyway, I ended up working for another accountant, where I worked for 2 years. And then I got a job with a new company being established, an insurance company. And I became the controller for that company. And finally opened my own practice of public accounting in 1965. Now you're talking about people in timing. My timing, I don't know whether it was good or bad, but 2 months after I opened my business, they have a riot, the 1965 racial riots in Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
And my office is right in the middle of it.
Oh, wow.
I survived that. And I joined an organization that was being formed. The Rockefeller Foundation was opening a branch to help underprivileged people to establish and run their businesses. So I volunteered and helped them to organize it here in Los Angeles, and worked with it for a time. After that, everything went well for me. In my accounting practice, before I retired, we had reached a point where, for a small business, I had 1,500 tax clients that we processed during tax season. I had 70 accounting clients that we handle and process during the rest of the year. And I had a few audit clients. So everything was good except that I was working too much. Mm-hmm. And I did that until I retired. And I'm still trying to get rid of that. But
yeah.
If you have any questions, I have omitted some things because I don't want to take up too much time.
Well, you pretty much answered a lot of it. A lot of the questions, just as you were speaking. One of the questions I had was, what type of recognition did you get after you got out? Or did you get any type of recognition as a Tuskegee Airman after you got out?
Oh, when I got out, nobody knew anything about Tuskegee Airmen when I got out. And it was several years later before we started recognizing it. And that was a result, I think, primarily of a book written by a Navy man. And it was called The Tuskegee Airmen, a red-colored book, about 120 pages. And I helped the group to publish that book, and it sold as fast as we could print it out. I don't know why they have discontinued it, because it had the very beginning, and it was an excellent book.
Then you covered it. After the war, you ended up going to USC, correct? After you got out, you ended up going to USC.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you were in the middle of the race riots, as you just said.
Yes.
What were you thinking then after that?
What was I thinking?
Yeah, what were you thinking? I come out of the war and I come to this.
Yeah, well, it was still wasn't enough to make me want to go back to a protected future. The thing is, I've never been one that liked to take orders. Mm-hmm. You know, I like to try to obey and follow every rule I'm supposed to, but I just don't like getting orders from somebody to tell me to do this or do that. Mm-hmm. And the only way I figured to do was to make my own way. I've been fortunate because my way worked out for me. It probably would have done the same had I stayed in, because the guy that took my job was a petty, what they call it, warrant. It was a warrant officer. Mm-hmm. He came in, went to lower instead of me, held his job down, and the next thing I knew, he was a 3-star general. You know, the first one in our group to become a 3-star.
2 more questions. Were you part, or were you part of the Freeman Field Mutiny?
Okay. The Freeman Field Mutiny happened before I got there. I was still at Tuskegee. I was still in training, and we would get sketches of it going on. Afterwards, I met some of the leaders of the Freeman Field Mutiny, including the guy that wrote this book. And they told me all about it. 102 men were arrested, and they were all pleaded guilty to what they were charged. They reduced charge, except one. And they received some kind of letter to go in their file that they were doing this, they had done this. The one that refused it, strangely enough, we had pretty close contact because he ended up working for the district attorney in some position, I don't know. And while I was working for the insurance company, I discovered fraud. Officers working over me, stealing money from the company. At that time, on the way I counted it, it ended up being about $20,000. In the 1960s, $20,000 was a lot of money.
A lot of money.
We went to the district attorney. They were indicted. They had trials, and these two guys that was engineering it, they went to prison. The insurance company recovered the money from their insurer, and they had to end up paying. Which reminds me, this guy who did all of this stealing and everything and trying to do everything he could to take every penny he could out of the company, had the nerve to call and ask me after I became a CPA if he could use my letterhead to write some kind of report for some company. I didn't even respond to it, and he should have known I wasn't going to do that. You know, but he had a big head. He went to Harvard University, and I don't know if you know it or not. Those Harvard University people know everything.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Or they like to say they do.
Yeah. When it became available and I became aware of it, and also I'm facing being drafted, and every guy on the campus that was drafted from Hampton went to the Navy. What did I do in the Navy? Wash dishes, serve meals, and that was it. I didn't want that. Alternative. Go to Tuskegee, learn how to fly. That was it. That was it. In addition to the fact that I really had wanted to fly. I remember in high school I saw an advertisement about Navy pilots and the gold wings. I really thought I should go volunteer for that. I had no idea that that was forbidden territory.
Oh.
I didn't know it until they started trying to open up flying for us guys.
Yeah.
That was part of my better part of my life was the time that I spent at Tuskegee and Lockburn with these returned veterans from the 332nd Fighter Group, and I knew quite a few of them. They were great guys, really great guys. But we had the cream of the crop down in Tuskegee. We had the cream of the crop. We had college professors, even to the effect that I remember we had one other farmer, and I think his family was sharecropper. I couldn't believe it when I met him, you know. Yeah. But he did it, and he made it. And the thing is, some of these people that people didn't think very much of, they did better than the college professors, you know. It's just amazing how you can go expecting one thing from a group of people, a certain group, and you're completely wrong. You're completely wrong. We had one student, and I briefly mentioned him to you in my class. His life was dedicated only to flying. He had been in California, and he started going to the airport when he was about 12 years old. He would carry water, you would wash planes, you would do anything that anybody wanted if they'd let him take him for a ride. He's the one that he ended up with when he came into service. He had already gotten his commercial pilot's license, instructor's license, radio something license. I didn't know it. I knew him, but he and I sort of melted together. We were friends. He didn't talk about himself. I didn't talk about myself. But we were friends. And when he got out of service, he went to the East Coast, worked at the docks, and pounded the pavement for flying with commercial airlines. He got a job as a co-pilot with one airline that was a freighter. They call it a freighter because that's what they did. They hauled freight, scheduled freight airliner along the east coast of New York, of the United States. From that, he ended up finally flying as co-pilot for the Flying Tigers airline. Co-pilot. What did they do? They would fly to the Far East, pick up animals, haul them back to the United States. That was his job. Now, here's something that I overlooked. When he would get over California, Los Angeles, he would get on his radio, call it Los Angeles Radio Man, and ask him to hook him up with me. And we would talk while he's flying over and I'm there working. And we would talk. Unbelievable, you know. Later on, when we had that blockade of Berlin, He flew in that like he was flying 18 hours a day as pilot and co-pilot in that situation, flying goods into Berlin, West Berlin, and back to wherever it was. What happened to him? Eventually, after all of this experience and he's still flying, he ended up as a pilot with LL Airlines. LL Airlines is Israeli airline. He was flying on the route as a co-pilot from Paris to Israel. This is what he was doing. And finally, after a while, he arranged for his wife, who was an actress of some kind, to meet him in Israel. And they were going to have a vacation together. She had never flown with him, but she was going to get on his flight back to Paris as a passenger, and they were going to go to Paris and have that vacation. On the takeoff, I haven't really discovered what happened. Some people said it was the people on the ground shooting these planes taking off in Israel. Some said it was the weather. But anyway, both of them were killed. Both of them were killed. Now, he was the very first black guy to become a pilot on a scheduled airline. The second was an underclassman of mine. He was about 4 classes behind me, who had made a career of the Air Force. And he came out of the Air Force and applied for a job. He ended up as an instructor for the engineers that were flying a certain airplane, Frontier Airlines. They couldn't hire him as a pilot, or wouldn't hire him as a pilot. But he was able to teach these pilots, as an instructor. He eventually got a job as a pilot, and he became a captain before he finally retired. He's deceased now. I think he died about 2 years ago.